Welcome to your town meeting. The town clerk has informed me that we have a quorum. I declare the 2015 special town meeting in session. I now invite Longmeadow High School student Rachel Bichard, president of the Key Club, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence to remember and honor veterans who have sacrificed for our country. Please rise and remain standing.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. To further honor the work that our service members do for our country every day, our invocation will be read by... Can you hear me now? To further honor the work that our service members do for our country every day, our invocation will be read by Stephen Kennedy, who served in the United States Army from 1963 to 1967, the majority of his service being with the 513th Military Intelligence Group in the little town of Oberursel, Germany, outside of Frankfurt. A Longmeadow resident since 1996, Steve currently serves as chair of the registrars of voters for the town. He is also co-coordinator of the Longmeadow Veterans Circle meetings, held the first Wednesday of each month at the Longmeadow Senior Center. All area veterans are encouraged to attend these gatherings. Steve?
We come together in civil assembly as a community in a tradition that is older than our Commonwealth itself. We come together to make decisions about our community. As we deliberate, let us advocate for our positions, but not at the expense of others. Let us remember that there is an immense gap between saying, "I am right," and saying, "I believe I am right," and that our neighbors with whom we disagree are good people with hopes and dreams as true and as high as ours. And let us always remember that, in the end, caring for each other in this community is of far greater importance than any differences we may have.
Thank you. Thank you. I welcome you to town meeting, the town's legislative body. To any first-time voters, I offer a special welcome. I have some general housekeeping details and announcements to make prior to the discussion of warrant articles. First, the fire marshal has informed me that in the event of a fire alarm, that exits are clearly marked. You see the two doors that you came in the back of the auditorium. There's also two doors on each side, and should we need them, there are doors beyond this curtain. The back of the warrant includes a general list of rules of procedure that we will follow. Warrant articles, as you know, are general warnings to the town about what will be discussed. We will vote on motions that are made to take some action or to not take some action. The oral motion may be different than the printed article. To speak, please wait for recognition from the moderator, then state your name and address. All remarks must be addressed to the moderator, and there is no cross-examination. There are two microphones on each aisle, one in the middle, and a center microphone for elected or appointed officials speaking on behalf of the board. Citizens wishing to speak shall line up at each microphone, and I shall alternate between recognizing those in each line. Whenever possible, preference shall be given to someone who has not had a chance yet to speak. All deliberation involves sharing of accurate, relevant information, weighing of advantages and disadvantages, and it ought to end when no new information is available. So I therefore ask that speeches be clear, brief, civil, and relevant. Should speeches wander from their point, however, or become repetitive, I will interrupt and encourage the speaker to come to the point. Motions for the previous question, or those to stop discussion and come to a vote, are in order once 5 have spoken in favor and 5 against. If fewer than 5, however, have spoken and no one else wishes to speak, we can come directly to a vote. All visitors must sit in the designated section. There's a section row A and B in the side to my left, and the first row, row A, is for non-voter department heads. So if you are a department head and you would like to sit in the front, that front row is for you. If you are a department head and a voter, please sit right behind. Thank you. Should we need to hear from those non-voters with expertise or specialized knowledge on a project before town meeting, I will permit some of these non-voters to speak. These include town department heads regarding issues relevant to their departments. When we come to a vote, I will ask you to raise your blue cards. Please keep them raised until instructed to lower them. We have one article, Article 10, that will require a 2/3 majority. And should there be a need for a hand count, the clerk has sworn in tellers who will act in pairs. We will have a new procedure, and I will ask for your patience as we try it out. It's used with success in other towns, and I will explain it more fully should the need arise. But essentially, voters are going to be voting by row, and tellers will be counting you in that section. Should the two tellers have a disagreement, they will recount that row immediately. I am now open to taking a motion on Article 1.
There we go, I think. Can everybody hear me? Good. Thank you, Madam Operator. Madam Moderator. I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $28,000 for the Finance Committee's Controlled Reserve Fund.
Is there a second? You may speak to the issue.
Increased enrollment in the daycare program run by the Parks and Recreation Department requires the addition of a full-time teacher in order to meet the mandated student-teacher ratio. The Finance Committee approved a transfer in August from the Reserve Fund, which under MGL Chapter 40, Section 6, is under its control. The Finance Committee is seeking to reimburse the Reserve Fund in case the fund needs during the FY 2016. Additionally, a fiscal year-end, the general fund will be reimbursed for any expenditure from this appropriation from the daycare fees collected.
If no one else is ready to speak, we may come to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. All opposed, raise your blue cards. The motion passes by majority affirmative vote. Article 2.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 for debt service account, retirement of short-term debt.
Is there a second? Second. You may speak to the issue.
This supplemental appropriation will accelerate the retirement of the town's general fund outstanding short-term debt. Current general fund short-term debt outstanding of the town includes townwide fiber optic cable at $176,000 and a Woodside Drive drainage project at $204,400. The town will also be securing short-term financing in November for the Crestview Circle Culvert project in the amount of $219,000.
If we're ready to come to a vote, all those in favor, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. All opposed, please raise your blue cards. The motion passes by unanimous affirmative vote. Article 3.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,000 for the employee benefits / liability insurance account for unemployment cost.
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. You may speak to the issue.
The town pays for unemployment costs on a reimbursable basis as a result of an above-average number of school separations at the end of FY 2015. The unemployment costs are running high. The town budgeted $100,000 in FY 2016 and has incurred the following costs thus far in FY 2016. July, $14,856, August, $18,734, and in September, $11,964. It is anticipated that this supplemental appropriation will carry the town for the remainder of the fiscal year as unemployment costs slowly subside as the year progresses.
No questions? Then we'll come to another vote. All those in favor, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your blue cards. The motion passes by unanimous affirmative vote. Article 4, Mr. Gold.
Madam Moderator, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $30,000 for the liability insurance account.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you. You may speak to the issue.
Yeah, Thank you. The town's fiscal year 2016 net premiums for property and casualty insurance, workers' compensation insurance, and police fire injury on duty insurance is up over $56,000 from last year's fiscal year 2015 premiums at this time. The fiscal year 16 budget was increased $30,000 in anticipation of this increase. The town has had a $4,891 surplus in the fiscal year 2015 account as a result of the carrier granting additional participation credits late in the fiscal year. The participation credits are not guaranteed. Should the town be lucky enough to receive additional participation credits in FY16, all excess funds in the account would be returned to the general fund at fiscal year end.
Any discussion? Please state your name and address, please.
Ernest Welker, 243 Burbank Road. I'd like to hear from Finance Director or anyone else who can answer this question as to why these expenses might have gone up and in what categories they were up, and then whether this is a trend or is this a one-off?
Is there someone from the Finance Committee who is able to speak to the question?
Finance Director.
Finance Director.
Finance Director, forgive me.
The main category that went up is our property insurance. As a result of this building here, we are carrying a higher amount of liability valuation. The other area that went up more substantially was and this amount went up by maybe $10,000 by itself, the police and fire injury on duty as a result of experience that we've been having over the past couple of years.
And that constitutes the total?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, Madam Moderator. And I'm asking if it constitutes the total amounts that are listed here.
I don't have the exact amount of every increase, but those were the two areas that did see the biggest increases.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll come right to a vote. All those in favor of motion on Article 4, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. All those opposed to the motion under Article 4, raise your blue cards. The ayes have it. The motion passes. Unanimous affirmative vote. Article 5, Mr. Gold.
Madam Moderator, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 for employee retiree benefits, employee health insurance.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you. You may speak to the issue.
Yes, the fiscal year 2015 health insurance account for employees ended up $100,000 short. The $100,000 deficit was absorbed mostly by an $80,000 surplus in the retiree health insurance line item. The account was level funded in fiscal year 2016. Beyond the fiscal year 2015 shortfall, the fiscal year 2016 general fund account for employee health insurance will face further pressure due to an additional 6 eligible school employees, a potential retiree health insurance increase in January 2016, and a planned additional shift of employees previously charged to the Sewer Enterprise Fund now being charged to the general fund.
Any questions? Discussion? Seeing none, we'll come right to a vote. All those in favor of the motion under Article 5, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. The motion passes by majority affirmative vote. Article 6, Mr. Gold.
Madam Moderator, I move the town vote to raise and appropriate $118,446 from the fiscal year 2016 Community Preservation Fund revenues for CPA Fund Balance Reserve for open space, $39,482, for the CPA Fund Balance Reserve for community housing, $39,482, and for the CPA Fund Balance Reserve for historic preservation, $39,482.
Is there a second? Second. You may speak to the issue.
Yes, the Community Preservation Act requires town meeting to appropriate or reserve for future appropriations at least 10% of the estimated annual CPA revenue for acquisition and initiatives for each of the following three categories: open space, community housing, and historic preservation. Approval of this article is intended to satisfy the requirement for fiscal year 2016. Currently, the FY16 state matching share is estimated at 18% of our estimated current year's revenues, surcharging $334,590 and state matching share, the 18% being $60,226.
Any discussion? Yes, sir. Please state your name and address.
Dan O'Malley, 68 Fair Hill Drive. Can someone answer the question of how much our matching share was this year, percentage-wise, for 15?
Mr. Paceric.
For FY15, I believe we received an amount closer to $75,000 or $80,000 from the state.
Is there a
Which would have
follow-up?
put it at what percentage?
Excuse me. Is there a follow-up? Go ahead.
Yes.
What percentage would that be, Paul?
That would roughly be about 25%.
And a follow-up question. Does anyone here know what that was originally set at when the law was enacted here in Long Meadow?
My recollection was that there would be a 100% matching share coming back to the town when it was originally enacted.
Thank you, Mr. O'Malley. There's
can I
another
have one
person.
more
Excuse me,
question?
Mr. O'Malley. There's another person who wishes to speak. Yes, sir. State your name and address.
Stephen Weiss, 18 Pioneer Drive. I'm the chair of the CPC. I think the match over the years has been, since I've been involved, in the 25 to 27% range. I think the reason it's going down is because more towns in the Commonwealth have adopted the CPC.
One more
Mr. O'Malley.
follow-up. So is it fair to assume that the rate has been going down steadily since original enactment? Is that a fair statement?
Mr. Paceric.
I think it actually has hit bottom, maybe, and it's been fairly steady the last couple of years. There was a big drop a few years back, but I see it right now as being fairly steady in this $75,000, $80,000 range. It fluctuates a little bit, but I don't think it will be going any lower.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Then we shall come right to a vote. All those in favor of the motion under Article 6, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your blue cards. The ayes have it. The motion passes by unanimous affirmative vote. Article 7, Mr. Lacusa.
Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer from the ambulance fund the sum of $9,000 to the Finance Committee Controlled Reserve Fund.
Thank you. You may speak to the issue.
In fiscal year 2015, the Finance Committee authorized a $9,000 reserve fund transfer to cover the cost of repair to the town's backup ambulance. The article seeks to reimburse from the ambulance fund where excess ambulance receipts are deposited to the Finance Committee Controlled Reserve Fund within the general fund. And it's recommended by the Finance Committee.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we shall come directly to a vote. All those in favor of the motion under Article 7, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your blue cards. The motion passes by unanimous affirmative vote. Article 8, Mr.
Moderator,
Lacusa.
I move that the town vote to transfer from available funds in the Treasury $438,300 for the purpose of continuing the architectural engineering design work for a new Department of Public Works complex, to retain the owner's project management, OPM, pursuant of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 149, Section 44A and half.
Is there a second? Thank you. You may speak to the issue.
Okay, the appropriations will continue the design effort that was initiated with a $250,000 appropriation received from the 2014 special town meeting. The feasibility study has been completed by the engineering firm retained by the town for the project and has been received by the DPW Facility Task Force, a group of residents that have been empaneled to guide the effort. Also have seen this. The additional funds will bring the project from feasibility study through the completion of schematic design, as well as the retain of services of an OPM, which is a requirement of public building projects over $1.5 million. The budget is as follows. Feasibility study, $35,000. Pre-design services, $183,500. Schematic services, $269,800. OPM, $200,000. Total expenses of $688,300. The original appropriations of $250,000. So additional funding required is $438,300. Recommended by the Town Finance Committee.
Earlier, Mr. Grant had asked, excuse me.
Yeah, Madam Moderator, I'd like to
Yeah, you
make
were ready to make a
presentation
presentation
on the
first?
article. Yes.
Mr. Crane.
Thank you. Good evening. Stephen Crane, Town Manager. Town meeting veterans know I usually come with PowerPoint presentations, and today I actually developed two. One, a 37-slide magnum opus just loaded with detailed information about this project. But my grandfather told me that there's no death worse than being talked to death, so I decided to do a second presentation that's a little more abridged. Before I start, I just want to put kind of a rhetorical question out there. Mr. Kennedy, in his wonderful invocation, talked about how Long Meadow has been here longer than the Commonwealth. And the question I have rhetorically is, do you believe Long Meadow is going to be here for another 50 years? So bearing that in mind, I wanted to just give you a brief presentation on how we got here on the DPW project and where we're going. So the project origins, about a year ago, Article 5 in the last fall town meeting warrant. We asked town meeting for $250,000 to get us going on a feasibility study, to do some initial site analysis, some programming work, and to retain a consultant to help us do that. It was recommended by the Finance Committee, and I just want to show, this is the vote.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move directly to a vote on this, on Article 5. This requires a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, would you please signify so by raising your green cards. All those opposed? The ayes have it.
I showed the clip because if you weren't there or don't remember, the support for this project was overwhelming. And I think that video really captures how much support town meeting had to get us started. And that support was so important to build on as we've been moving through this phase and really are excited about moving forward. So the first thing we did was we retained Weston and Sampson Engineering, and they are a big outfit and really the top engineering firm for DPW facilities. They've done a lot of projects in Massachusetts and elsewhere, and we've gotten a lot of benefit from their experience. And representatives of Weston and Sampson are here tonight if the question gets a little over my head for details. So they came on board. They interviewed DPW personnel. They reviewed how we do our operations, how work flows in the department, what our existing operations look like, what the existing facility looks like, and then they started doing individual room sheets that would meet collectively the needs of the department. And this is just 3 examples. The one down here in the lower right-hand corner is the vehicle and equipment storage bay, which is really the heart of the facility. You have the maintenance bays that would be proposed, and then just a sample office. So it really covered every different type of space. When they came up with their recommendation of what would be the ideal DPW facility, it was about 53,000 square feet. we took their room sheets, their programming sheets internally, DPW and other town personnel, and really went through them in great detail. And we committed ourselves to wringing out absolutely every square foot that wasn't really needed. Because we know that the more space you have, the more the project is going to cost, and we've dedicated ourselves to making sure that we keep this project as cost-effective as possible while still meeting the needs of the town today and in 50 years. I'm proud to say that just in our first blush internal effort, we took a 20% cut off of the space, which translates directly into 20% reduction in the cost. So the other big thing that we did as a part of this process is appointed a DPW task force. And it really is a combination of town personnel, our engineers, and residents. And I think the residents that we asked to serve are distinct for either participating in a board or a committee that is a stakeholder with the DPW or will be a part of the decision-making process going forward, or people who have specific knowledge in the construction industry. But the biggest role they play is they are town meeting voters just like all of you, and their job is to provide the town direct feedback on how this project looks to residents who are going to vote on it and have to be a part of this going forward. And the insights has been invaluable, and I really commend the folks on this slide here because it really has been an eye-opener and education for I think all of us to really get that ground level input from this task force. So part of our process has been looking at site selection, and Weston and Sampson really has led the way on this. They have a model that they use for these types of projects all over, and when they explained the model to us, it was really, again, an eye-opener because of how effective and how dispassionate it made the analysis. And so they took all of the town-owned sites that we have, about 112 parcels. We removed Pondside Road from consideration because the select board, as shown in the article from last year, had already decided to eliminate it from consideration because of floodplain and other issues that we can explain in greater detail later. We also added one private site that had been identified as a viable site by a previous DPW siting task force from 2008. So they basically dumped all of those parcels into this set of filters that you can see here, and what came out of the bottom was essentially 6 parcels that are the most viable in the community for a potential DPW site, which really, if you know the town, you know there really aren't very many places it can go, and so we were left with 6. They then took those 6 sites and analyzed them through criteria that, somewhat subjective, but, there are points associated with each of them, and we spent a lot of time talking about this at the task force. So not only did we get the benefit of Weston and Sampson's expertise at the task force level, we kicked it around and analyzed each of the 6 sites. And through that analysis, Wolf Swamp Road and the Grand Meadows Tennis Club were identified as the top 2 sites. The other sites you can see here, Bliss Park, Laurel, Quinnetuck Rear, Academy Drive, Turner Pond Park, are all essentially recreational areas. Really not ideal. And through the discussion, the top 2 sites, even though the scoring may not necessarily reflect that, the top 2 sites really separated themselves from the bottom 4. And after a lot of discussion, Wolf Swamp Road was a site that was recommended by the DPW task force. So the next thing that Weston Sampson did was they prepared some conceptual analysis of what that would look like. And as you can see, the proposal is, and this is not set in stone, this is why we need the additional funds to go forward and really continue the site analysis in a deeper way and see if these 2 sites are going to work. If not, go back to the drawing board on the site selection. But as you can see, the proposal is to have it in that kind of gravelly parking area back by where the power lines are. And the primary benefit, in addition to all the positive qualities it has as a location for the DPW, the primary benefit is the existing parking and traffic issues that are really pronounced during sporting events could really largely be mitigated through this project and through the process of renovating that area and then having the parking lot that would be the DPW employee parking lot be available for use on weekends when the DPW is closed. So a shared parking scenario here. Another possible benefit is the potential for playing field expansion on what is called, that's the Quinnetuck Road rear parcel. And it is currently conservation land, so we'd be looking at something, we'd be talking to the Conservation Commission about that. But that opportunity is there. So this is for these reasons, this really kind of emerged as, far and away the most preferable site by the task force, and from an engineering standpoint as well. I showed you the Grand Meadows site as well. Based on information we have from town officials, the building that's there really isn't suitable for rehabilitation for a DPW facility. And that's kind of it gets into the engineering details of it for the reasons why, but it really wouldn't work as it exists today. So it would be demolishing the existing structure and placing new structures on the site, and you can kind of see what that concept would look like. So the other thing is we've been developing, again, we're at the kind of front end stages of design. And so we have a lot of work to do to continue to have the building take shape, develop the costs, and drive the costs down as much as possible, and identify efficiencies that allow us to meet our needs efficiently. And you can see that, like I said, this is kind of a back of the envelope order of magnitude cost based on their experience, but it's up over $300 a square foot. That's not inexpensive, but that is the going rate of DPW facilities today. The cost of not doing it today is severe. I call your attention to the top right-hand column. I don't know if you can read it, but in 2000, the going rate for a DPW facility was $96 a square foot. So the cost has tripled since the year 2000. And if we're going to be here for another 50 years, the cost is only going to go in one direction. And at some point in time, if we don't take action and take responsibility for this long overdue and much needed project, we will be forced to do it through either a natural disaster or a building failure. And when you have to make choices and do projects under duress like that, it gets very expensive. And that's why it's so important to keep the process moving on the facility through Article 8. So if we're able to get your support for Article 8, we will complete the site analysis and prepare a site recommendation that we would bring to a future town meeting. We would complete schematic design, which is really the bulk of the design work that goes into a building project, and gets you to see what the floor plans look like specifically, what the elevations look like, and how much, with a much greater level of certainty, would it cost. We would also begin the permitting process and advance that effort to see what permits we're going to need, where some high hurdles would exist, and what we would need to surmount those hurdles. And then we would under the Massachusetts building law and the public construction law, before you start schematic design, you have to hire what's called an owner's project manager, which is basically a consultant that helps guide municipalities through these complicated public construction projects. We had one here for the high school, and I'm sure that on past projects and future projects we'll have it as well. It really is a tremendous benefit to the community to have, and it's the law to have one, but once you have the OPM, you really have someone who can drive the project forward and protect the community's interests. And as you saw in the video, town meeting overwhelmingly supported this, which means it's important to keep the process going. And no matter where we're going to put it or how much it's going to cost, all of these steps that we're seeking to do under Article 8 are needed. There's no getting there without going through these steps. So I'm hoping that you will support Article 8 and keep this important project moving. Thank you.
Thank you. Prior to town meeting, Mr. Grant had asked permission to deliver a 5-minute presentation, and when the slides are ready, I will allow Mr. Grant to take the floor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Moderator. And I would like to offer what I would call a broader context on this question of the DPW facility. And I start by showing this picture. It's not quite as good a picture as the town manager showed, but you want to take a look at that green area. Most of that green area is part of the Wolf Swamp Fields currently, and that's where we play soccer. I know, and I think everybody else knows, how short of fields we are in this town. When we had a question of whether we could have artificial turf on the high school football field, we had people coming out of the woodwork saying, we need to increase field space and this is a way to do it. This would be a pretty significant reduction of field space. But I'm not really focused on that. I mean, everybody can make their judgment on that point. But I would like to just consider what you're doing, what this vote means. It's really an endorsement of doing the project itself. And I think we ought to focus on that question and, frankly, what the costs are and whether we want to do that or not. So what I'd like to do, if, whoops. Okay, so what will it cost? So you just heard it was about $300 per square foot at 42,000 square feet. That's a $12.6 million. But that's not all. You're also going to be looking at a $1 million tear down. That's based on a briefing that was given to us in 2013 by Ty and Bond when we toured the existing facility. And I'd like to just make a note. The numbers that I'm offering you, these are estimates. They're not exact. I've tried not to overstate them. I've actually tried to be optimistic because I don't want to be, I don't want to be accused of, playing the costs up. But even when you do that, they are significant. The site work at the new location, you're looking at least $1 million. The design work, between $750,000 and $1 million. There's always a contingency component that's put into a project. And then another cost that I think ought to be considered is replacing that lost field space, because that is a cost, just like tearing down the old facility. If we don't do that, we're not really reckoning with what this project would really cost. So then the question, which is probably what most people are thinking about, what will it cost you? So let's assume that we've financed $16 million. And again, I'm being optimistic on this, over 20 years. And I'm getting these numbers, these calculations based on a debt projection worksheet that the CFO, Paul Pasterzik, provided the Select Board earlier in the budget season that allows you to understand how much debt service you're going to have for each year based on how much you're borrowing. And so this would add $1.4 million in debt service. That would be what we'd have to put into the budget. And to give you a sense of the magnitude of that, currently our debt service was $3.9 million, the last budget that we had. And I mentioned this also because one of the considerations that the Select Board looked at when we were deciding whether to start the statement of interest for the middle schools was a concern that we hadn't really gotten beyond paying off the high school. And our payments hadn't gone down for the high school. In fact, just so as you know, we're going to be paying for the high school over a 30-year period. So that's not going away anytime soon. So I looked at a presentation that our assessor just presented to the Select Board on the average home assessment and the total assessment of property in the town of Long Meadow. The average home is assessed at $327,000. And if you do the math, you're looking at about a $233 increase in property tax for this project, again, under these optimistic circumstances. Now, we've got something else on the horizon, which is the senior center, which I frankly think has a lot of merit. We've gotten a report that estimates that the senior center would cost between $5.9 and $9.3 million. That would mean a cost to the average homeowner of $85 to $134 per year if you finance it over 20 years. The middle schools, we got another report recently on that. If you had 2 new middle schools, the estimate is $111 million. One combined middle school would be $83 million. Now, let's again be optimistic that we get 40% state reimbursement. In fact, we don't really know what's going on with the state, but let's say that's something we can achieve. The cost for an average homeowner is $726 to $972 per year. Okay, so, middle school and taxes. All right. And then this next slide I completely lifted from a presentation that Richard Foster gave in 2013, which was very helpful. He talked about infrastructure needs. And if you add all that up, you're looking at $300 million. If you just took into account the sewer, water, and roads, you're looking at $157 million. It is mind-boggling. There is no plan to deal with this. It is, just almost too much to think about. And this is the boring stuff in town government. It's like replacing a roof instead of, renovating your kitchen. So I'm sorry, this clicker is a little difficult. All right, so the combined, but let's just ignore all the boring stuff. And what would a DPW plus a senior center plus middle schools be? We're talking $1,000 to $1,300 per year for the average homeowner. And so my question is, does anybody think we're going to do that? To me, the question of, are we going to, because the way this would play out in the spring, we'd have another town meeting, and then we would go to the polls to have to approve a debt override. And the question is, are we going to do that once for the DPW? Are we going to do it again for the senior center and then again for the middle schools? And do we think all of those would pass with those kinds of budget impacts? And what I'm proposing is coming up with a capital funding plan that considers everything, that puts everything on the table, and it forces us to prioritize and to consider more modest proposals. For example, with the DPW facility, when I did the tour, the biggest emphasis was we don't have a place to park vehicles. Do we need to spend $15 to $20 million to park trucks? Is there a cheaper alternative? I don't know how that would come out, but that's something that we ought to be considering.
Mr. Grant, you're
Yes.
over time.
Okay, and I'll just one more second. And so what this process would allow us to do is develop a consensus of what we're willing to pay for. And so my final point is just that I would encourage not to kill this project, but place it on hold, to allow these other projects to catch up to it, and so that we can consider it all together. And the only way that's going to happen is if you decide to make it happen, because to date, there's been no appetite for that within town government.
Thank you. Next, state your name and address, please.
Roger Wojcik, 57 Parkside Street. I have a question, Madam Moderator, for the project team. To what extent has or will the neighborhoods surrounding the selected site be interviewed for the impact of the DPW in the neighborhood in which it's located? This is an extremely busy operation, and it would seem to me the neighborhood, the influence on the neighborhood should be a significant part of the final decision, which sounds like it hasn't been made. That's point one. Number two, I don't fully understand the business of the owner's project manager, in that at this point in time we don't have a project. I mean, we're spending a great deal of money, I understand that, but we don't have an approved project. Is it appropriate at this point in time to have a project manager?
Is there someone who can address that? Mr. Crane?
Yes, Roger. I'm sorry, I was messing with the microphone with Richard. Well, the first part was neighborhood input. So I think that is a part of our next phase. We wanted to, the first level of citing a facility like this in this community is, where can it even go, all things being equal? And that's a challenge because we are largely built out. We don't have large shovel-ready parcels to put in a place like this. And so it was really first, step one, figure out where could it go if, no other factors were considered. Now that we've gone through that process, we can do that deeper analysis of what would it mean, what would it look like, and make those presentations to the neighborhood. Right now, we really don't have much to show in terms of volumes of truck traffic and the questions people like you're going to have, which are good questions. What's it going to mean for my day-to-day business? Is it going to be dust? Or am I going to hear beeping noises at 5 o'clock in the morning? I mean, all these things. That's where we have to keep moving with the project to get those questions answered. And as I referenced in my remarks, under the Public Construction Law, Chapter 149, municipalities are required to hire an owner's project manager. It's not like a town, it can be a town staff person, but we don't have somebody with the level of experience, but it is a legal requirement to go into schematic phase design.
Thank you.
Yes.
Madam Moderator, my name is Arlene Miller, 68 East Greenwich Road. I want to start by saying I was really surprised to see my name up there in the committee, just because I've been on the committee for maybe 48 hours. It was a sudden appointment last week, so I have had no input whatsoever to this date in the proposal as seen before us, but I'm looking forward to possibly having some input before. I'm a little concerned we're putting the cart before the horse. I definitely support the idea of work on the DPW building. We do need it. It's in bad shape. We need a facility for the future. I completely agree with those concepts. I'm concerned, of course, about recycling. And the recycling center, as I understand it, has been completely deleted from this conversation. So I think it's a little premature to keep marching forward with parcels that possibly would not accommodate that fabulous, valuable service to the community. Not to say it would be demolished and wouldn't exist, but it would be completely at the other side of town from the facility that helps run it. So I also am concerned that there hasn't been much community input. I think I kind of know what's going on in town. I think I probably keep abreast of stuff more than most. I had no clue we were at this phase or where we were, and I'm concerned that the public hasn't had a chance, neighbors, to ask questions and residents to ask questions about this and have more input at this point. So I'm just raising these as concerns, and I just want to clarify that although my name, I appreciate, was on the list, that 48 hours on the list, but thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Russell.
Madam Moderator, James Russell, 108 Bel Air Drive. I've lived here in town going on 52 years. I have walked the DPW complex. I wouldn't want one of my worst enemies, and I don't have too many of those, to have to work under those conditions. There are approximately 45 part-time and full-time employees, male and female, that are currently working down in the town yard. I have come to town meeting after town meeting and heard about we need to do something for our DPW staff. Time has come, costs are going up. Think back to this past winter when we were all in our homes, snug as a bug, and a force of snowplow operators plowed snow week after week after week so that we could get out of our driveways, go to work, go to the hospital, go to the market to get food. And even while this was all going on, we had a CPC project of $25,000 at the senior center to replace the kitchen. And in between grabbing a cat nap, these loyal DPW employees came to the senior center and rebuilt a brand new kitchen for the seniors in this town. The time has come when you're sleeping. What happens if there's a water main break? What happens if there's a sewer break? These employees, these men that are out with their equipment, they have a responsibility. They don't call in sick. They do their job. They make us proud. They make us safe. I urge you to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, state your name and address.
Madam Moderator, Cynthia Summer, 57 Farmington Avenue. I'm direct this to whoever can answer the question. Is the feasibility study and the design and schematic services, are they for one of the two alternatives or for both of the alternatives?
Mr. Crane.
Thank you. Are we doing a feasibility study for both sites? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
The focus is on the preferred site, and I think we're going to try and assess the feasibility of that site. If we get into it and decide that it's less feasible than we initially thought, or the hurdles are too high, I think we would look at the secondary site. We don't want to spend too much of our fee on chasing down a site that really, ultimately, there may not be town meeting support for an acquisition of a private site. So the focus really is on the first site, the Wolf Swamp Field site, but we are going to keep looking at both. I think we want to identify what are, so when someone asks us what are the pros and cons of the sites, we have done an analysis to a level of both that can answer a lot of those questions. But in terms of getting into like conceptual design and layouts and elevations, the focus would be on the first site.
Thank you. Can I do a follow-up? Okay.
I'll allow it this one time, yes.
Okay. So just on what other folks have, I mean, that was a question. Can I make a comment, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay. I really would like to support moving forward with this project at this time for several reasons. One is that I do want to have a capital plan for the town, and this will help with the capital planning in that we will be further along and know the true costs and true situation that will help us in planning with all of the other needs. And also, it is desperately needed because the buildings are like in falling down shape. They have cracks all over them. It's not just a matter of parking things, it's a matter of the safety of the employees, as was mentioned, but also we need to move with this so that the buildings just don't fall down.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Patrick Malloy from...
I'm sorry, I can't hear your name or address. Just speak.
Patrick Malloy from 26 Lees Lane.
Thank you.
My question is, just looking at the wording here, the project is including feasibility studies, pre-design, schematic, and my concern is that at the end of all of this, you don't actually have a working building here. You can't build with any of that. So it's going to need to include construction documents, and that is not included in the total price, so it's a little misleading. And it seems like with the current consultant that you have that you're trying to roll this right into schematic. Will this go out to bid? Significant cost savings could be realized with going out to bid. So those are a few of those questions. The other thing is, do we have a master plan, maybe a 10-year master plan? And a follow-up question to that is, would this be consistent with that master plan?
Thank you. Mr. Crane.
Well, thank you for the questions. It's a lot. I guess I'll start backwards. There is a long-range master plan. In fact, we are in the process of working with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to update that, and our PVPC is going to actually be at the planning board tomorrow night to talk to the planning board and engage them in their feedback on where the long-range plan is going. But this in the long-range plan was clearly identified as recreational fields going forward. To some extent, the long-range plan did not really contemplate some of the pressures that we now realize. It's 10 years old, and some of the pressures we're realizing now 10 years later. So long-range plans do need to be revisited over time, and I think that this concept, along with other more recent occurrences, will inform the new plan. So in terms of the consultant, we went through a rigorous designer selection process. I don't know if you're familiar, but hiring designers for public construction projects is another heavily regulated process by state statute. So we already went through that bidding process, if you will. In the design world, you're not allowed to do a traditional bid like we're going to hire the cheapest architect. You do what's called request for qualifications, and you interview consultants who are qualified to do the job, and then you negotiate a fee. So the front end of the process was that we're very happy with the work Weston and Sampson is producing. Like I said, they were far and away the most qualified firm, and I think we've gotten a lot of good work for a pretty reasonable amount now. We do want to roll right into schematic phase design. You are correct about design development and PS&E or construction documents. We're just trying to keep the project moving forward. We understand this is a big deal for the town. It's a big commitment, and we're trying to keep a steady pace and keep the work moving forward so it doesn't hit us all at once. I do think at a future town meeting, if we are able to agree on a site and we are able to come in with a schematic design that the town can accept, that's when we go forward and make the other investment. If we can't get to those points, there's no sense in having fee for design development and construction documents. You know what I'm saying? We're trying to, let's get to the next check mark and then move forward. Did I answer all of them?
I believe you say it's not going to go out to bid.
We already did that process at the beginning when we hired Weston and Sampson.
Okay.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, Dave Horowitz, 18 Circle Road. I'm Vice Chair of the Parks Commission as well as a member of the DPW Task Force. I'd like to speak on this project, and I'd like to support the project. I supported it back in 2014 with the original $250,000 appropriation. I think we should roll this forward. There's a few things that I consider self-evident, and I encourage anyone amongst you to tour the DPW yard as it stands today. And what's self-evident is that we're really working with an area that needs to be upgraded, needs to be replaced. Every year we push this can down the road is going to be more and more money that we're going to have to spend. The town's going to be here a lot longer than 50 years, Mr. Crane. It's going to be here a long time. And in order to have that happen, we need a functioning DPW garage. We're spending more to do less because that facility is so dilapidated and needs upgrades. Regarding the location, I support the Wolf Swamp location wholeheartedly, assuming the Kinnatuck properties are available for use. I know that's not at a final point, but I would ask the question of the folks from Weston and Sampson, at least to provide us with the square footage of the existing facility as it would impact the fields, as compared to what might be available for the Kinnatuck property that you showed on the earlier slide.
The net field space that's left with the wetland
Mr.
demarcations?
Exactly.
Okay.
Was that a request for one of the consultants?
Yes, ma'am.
We don't have the exact figure according to the Weston Sampson, but I think if you, and I could call it back up, but I think if you look at, when I was looking at it earlier, clearly room for one more multi-purpose field, and I think down the corner, room for at least another maybe Little League ball diamond. That's if you're just going to plunk two down. I think what that additional area gives you is the opportunity to rethink the entire layout. And we understand field space is a premium. We've had the conversation many times with the task force, and that is not, and to Alex's point, we do view making sure that we don't lose field space as a core part of the project.
Thank you.
Mr. Elias.
Richard Elias, 608 Frank Smith Road. I've been on the Finance Committee for over 6 years, and I've been allowed to stick my head into places that normally people in the town would not be able to get into. So we're going to start off with a couple of things. I've seen everything coming back and forth, and this project's been on the wall for more years than I was on the select board or some people here were ever in town. It's always been put off because we had something else that was more important. But it's time that stops. I'd like to thank Mr. Grant for his presentation. He brings up some very interesting points that should be addressed, and you people are entitled to that. First off, the Wolf Swamp property belongs to the town. The next property, we'd have to buy it. That's a significant amount of taxpayer money that we don't have to pay for. As far as the places where they don't have places to park their trucks, It's kind of nice in the winter if you don't have to clear off your truck so you can go plow. Their trucks don't fit in the garages that we have now, and those garages are falling down. The couple of storms we've had last year and the year before, I don't know how that place is standing. And those people down there work hard for this town. They deserve a nice place, not fancy, but safe and healthy for them to work. And that's another factor that we should take into consideration. We count on them. We should support them. There's a few other things you can put up on this. He's came up with other projects that have to be done in the town. Well, they're all important, but they're not going to fall apart if they're not done this year or next year. And the studies usually take a few years to get done. This can be done before they finish their other studies. In some cases, maybe not. But it's important to the town that we have a facility that can be utilized by our people, safe for our people, and at the least cost that we can come up with. And using a place that's owned by the town is very, very important in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Starr.
Thank you. Larry Starr, 81 Williamsburg Drive. First of all, I'd like to start off by congratulating both Mr. Grant and our town manager. Those were great presentations. I'm very pleased to see so much information provided, and Mr. Grant's comments were absolutely critical to listen to, because we do need to do long-range planning. There's absolutely no question about that. Let's talk about this project. I don't think there's anybody in this room who expects that we don't have to build a new DPW facility. The only question is when, and is it going to come before or after some other projects? The other big project on the horizon is the senior center. Well, we have a senior center. It's not falling down, but it isn't the greatest, and we do want to do something about that. But what's risen to the top now, probably rose to the top 10 years ago, is the DPW building. And I don't think there's any doubt that we're going to have to do that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing a long-range capital plan. We should be doing that too. But we need to build this building. Nobody is going to question that what we have now is correct. Can we cut some prices? Can we make some more cuts from the 20% they already came up with? I'll let the committees work on that and figure out if we can. And if we can, great. If we can't, so be it. But we need a facility to do what a DPW facility will do, to be able to protect the trucks. What costs aren't in there are costs of the wear and tear on the trucks themselves because they are not housed correctly, and that costs us money too, not built into the expense factor. That'll be eliminated. So the time to make this decision to move ahead at this point and to see what we can do on these items is now. And we're going to have to do it. We're going to have to do it. That building is falling down. None of the other facilities are falling down. The middle schools can continue for 5 years, 7 years, however long. It took us a long time to get this building up. Meanwhile, the old building, I spent 17 years on the high school council. We lived with it. It wasn't good, but we lived with it until we could afford to do this. We can afford to do the building. We have to do the building. And we still have to do the long-range plan because all those other things are coming down the pike. But now, at this point in time, we have to commit to build this facility, and that's what these numbers are for. So I suggest that we go ahead and vote in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wojcik.
Again, Roger Wojcik, 57 Parkside. What hasn't been mentioned this evening and was mentioned in the first meeting on this subject was the fact that a new facility will substantially reduce the environmental impact of all of the work we do in the town by the DPW. That's real. If you want to go after the numbers, it'd be worth doing. Number two, it will substantially increase the productivity of the group that's down there. The numbers of people that were already mentioned, they're doing the best they can with what they got. If you don't give them the tools, they're still doing the best they can, but nowhere near as fast as could be done. Those numbers should, in some way, shape, or form, substantially improve the justification for this. Certainly now is the time to build this place.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank both people, Mr. Grant and Town Manager, for the presentations. As you're well aware, there's likely 4 sides to every issue, and this is not without its sides. If I knew how you were going to vote, I could sit down, but I don't know how you're going to vote. So I would feel remiss not to at least say a couple of words. I spoke to this issue a year ago. I appreciate Mr. Starr getting up and speaking in favor, and the other ones that have spoken in favor of this issue. This issue was first brought to light in 1987 with an engineering study that said we needed to replace that complex. I did some research today while you were enjoying yourself and maybe at work making money. I was sitting in the library going through old documents, and I found out in 1988 it actually was a warrant article that went to town meeting and was defeated. And that's the last time it reared its head up until 2 years ago. That's 27 years ago since this item's been brought before the public in this town. Mind you, folks, in 1987, the engineering reports documented it needed to be replaced. Again, the study in 2008 just hammered down dead on it again that it needed to be replaced. We've heard tonight that we have future needs. I'm well aware of the future needs. I'm a taxpayer in this community. I'm also well aware of the needs that on the long-range stuff that Mr. Grant showed you is all true. Those figures are real. But we're not going to do it in one night. It's going to take a phased approach. But when we get facilities that come up like this, you can't phase them. You must instill and put the facility in place. If we'd have built this facility in 1988, I would imagine it'd come in about $2.5 million. And you see what the prices are now. You can see what the prices have done just since the year 2000. I'm shocked at those prices. Quite a bit of that is just where we live. This is a very expensive market up here. But lay no doubt, we need a new facility. We need to get our people up out of the floodplain. And we need the help of the community to make this happen. I wished I could say that we stand united here as a select board. Unfortunately, we don't, as you've seen from some of the presentations. We have varying feelings on this. And I guess that's the nature of the beast. But I think you as a resident of this community have heard enough, and I think you know what needs to be done, and I have full faith that you're going to do the right thing for our community. Thank you.
Yes.
Arlene Miller again. Thanks for the history lesson. I was here longer than you were, and I want to add to that a little bit, if I may. We went for an override for this building during that time period, and it was just before the library override. It was about a $2.5 million, $3 million project. You're correct. Everybody agrees. Everybody agreed then it needs to be replaced. We did a complete search, and we had engineering studies even done for a site. There was no place in town that wanted this building. We looked behind the library. We looked all over the place. And the place that it came back to was where it is, on Pondside Road. It was found to be the best place. We have engineering drawings for it. We had architectural plans for it. I have it on my desk. That's my concern. I agree with everything everybody said. Yes, we need a new facility. Yes, the people need a better place to work. I'm not sure we have the right site yet figured. And if we're going forward with this extra money on that site, is that a mistake? That's my concern.
Yes, sir.
My name's Tim Sterrett. I'm a resident of Green Hill Road. I've lived in Longmeadow for over 50 years. I'm a member of the Finance Committee as well as the DPW Task Force. I want to thank Mr. Crane for asking me to participate in the task force because it gave me an opportunity to kind of see what goes into a project like this. What Mr. Crane assembled was not just a group of people that were wanted to join something. It was a group of people that had specific interests and skill sets and represented different interests, like the gentleman from the Park Department, several folks with engineering backgrounds, myself with a finance background. So there was a pretty broad audience that was put together to address some of the concerns that folks have kind of raised about, well, what about this and what about that? There was a lot of dialogue around that. I just want to make certain that folks understand this was not a haphazard or a gamed kind of a project. There's a lot of thought put into the group that was assembled to give the considerations. There was independence in terms of bringing in the folks from outside of the community to kind of give a broader perspective, as well as folks from within the town that do have the town's best interest. I think the task force has done a good job. I think it's important that we continue to move forward with this move forward with the project. As I think that the 50-year comment was, very articulate. I don't think we have 50 years to kind of contemplate this. And yes, there are other buildings that need to be replaced. Some of those buildings that we're talking about replacing are not nearly as old as the buildings that we're talking about, this particular building that we know we need to replace now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Moderator, Jim Russell, 108 Bel Air Drive, Long Meadow. I respectfully request that you move the question.
I will just have this called. If no one else is ready to speak, then we won't have to do that motion. That requires a vote. So if we're ready to come to a vote, we'll just vote. If you have moved the previous question, then you wish to move the okay, there's a second. If we move the previous question, we are coming to a vote on whether to end debate. So this vote is not a vote on the motion, it's a vote on whether or not to end debate. All those in favor of ending debate now, please raise your blue cards. All those opposed to ending debate now, please raise your blue cards. The ayes have it. We shall come to an immediate vote on the motion before us, Article 8. All those in favor of the motion under Article 8, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. All those opposed to the motion, please raise your blue cards. The ayes have it. The motion passes by majority affirmative vote. We shall come to Article 9.
That's fine, thanks. I move that the town vote to transfer from available funds in the Treasury $50,000 for tasks including, but not limited to, additional site analysis, conceptual site plan, and conceptual building renderings for the development of a new or renovated senior center.
Is there a second? You may speak to the issue.
At the annual town meeting on May 13, 2014, a citizen's petition was approved that appropriated $35,000 for a feasibility suitability study of options to provide more suitable space and facilities for the Long Meadow Council on Aging facilities that are now located at Greenwood Center. The Pioneer Valley Planning Commission was engaged to conduct this study and submitted results at a cost of approximately $10,500. At the annual town meeting of May 12, 2015, an additional citizen's petition approved the use of the remaining $24,500 from the prior warrant article to engage an architect and/or engineer to do further cost analysis of 2 sites for the purposes of identifying a recommended location. A detailed analysis was completed, and in October of this year, the Select Board accepted the renewal of the Adult Center facilities as a town-directed project. The funds requested through this warrant article will allow for continued progress on the project, including conceptual designs and further analysis of site-related decisions.
Any discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we already seconded it.
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Wojcik.
Again, Roger Wojcik, 57 Parkside. Reading Article 9, I noticed that the original May 13th approval, of 2014 that is, which was a year and a half ago, was a study of options to provide more suitable space. I believe that study was completed in roughly mid-2014, and indeed, a location was specified along with alternatives. Apparently, another study has been completed with the remaining $24,500, and 2 sites were further analyzed. Now this evening, we're looking for another $50,000 to do additional site analysis for the development of new or renovated senior center. A renovated senior center is possible at its current location. A new one would be disruptive, to say the least, if it was at that location. What I'm trying to figure out is, given all the studies that have been started or proposed, have we really picked a site for the senior center, or are we fussing over this thing still after a year and a half? Somebody help me.
Madam
Crane.
Moderator, I guess, I would briefly offer that this project has certainly had an arc to it. It was started by a citizen's petition because it was a treasury expenditure. The town administration had to effectively manage the project and the finances. So I stepped in, put together a task force, and had been meeting regularly to advance the project. The first phase did a lot of good work for doing survey work and identifying where senior population is, where it's going, what they want in a senior center, but it was not an architectural or engineering study. So at the end of it, we got, kind of a back of the envelope, not even the back of the envelope, just a kind of spitball estimate of what things could cost and where it could go. So we realized that we had even more questions about what would truly suitable space cost and where would it go. And those were really architecture and engineering questions. So we went back to annual town meeting and said, we only spent 10,000 of the 35, can we have the other 25? We retained an architecture and engineering firm who went in and did that detailed analysis and came out with a report that really gave us a lot more detail on the two chosen sites that were recommended by the task force, Turner Park, which actually they divided into 3 separate sites within Turner Park, and then a renovated and expanded Greenwood. So I wouldn't say we're fussing over it. I would just say that as we learn more, some questions get answered, but some bigger questions get asked, and we keep trying to answer the questions as they come up.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, Mr. Wojcik. This man over here will have the floor. He was waiting next.
Hello, Seth Tenenbaum, 28 Ardsley Road. I wanted to say I'm very supportive of the seniors in the community, and I think that they deserve to have the best senior center possible, but I also had some questions about the current operations at the senior center. I wanted to find out, first of all, do you know what percentage of the users of the senior center are Long Meadow Town residents?
Mr. Crane?
I know that there are some folks who do come from out of town. I don't know, our executive director, Amy Sada, here, do you have that information?
I'm sorry, could you?
About 88%.
Oh, thank you.
Now, do we charge those non-residents either a usage fee or a monthly fee, or do we charge them a fee for events, or do we just let them come in the same way our town's residents do?
And I would suggest if you have any other questions,
That
I'll
would be
ask
my
them
last
all
question,
now. Thank you very
and then I have a
much.
comment after that.
Well, no, please make your
After
comment.
the answer, I just want one quick comment.
Excuse me, sir. People are waiting in line.
Okay, then I'm going to say this. If we
Thank
do
you.
not charge for the seniors for out-of-town events, I think it's not right and it's wrong, and I think our costs for this new senior center would be certainly not tons lower, but they'd be somewhat lower. I mean, you look at Enfield, Connecticut, and East Longmeadow, they have charge fees for out-of-town residents that are higher than if they even have fees for town. You look at Northampton up in Massachusetts, they have about $180 a year for non-residents. I would like to know if we're doing that now, and if not, I think that that's an important thing we should be doing that would lower the cost of things like this new senior center.
Thank you. Do you want to address the question that he had?
Some of the programs that are offered do have charges for them. I don't have the exact list, but we can...
Excuse me, sir, you are not in order right now.
Why don't you get with me after the meeting or maybe during the week, and you can certainly talk to Executive Director Amy Sada about it at any time.
Sir, thank you. Mr. Metz.
Dr. Metz, Stephen Metz from 171 Coventry Lane. I'd like to echo Mr. Wojcik's comment. $10,000 is a rather hefty back of the envelope, and I'm wondering what the front of the envelope is going to cost. I wonder if, before we go forward with this, that we could get a more detailed presentation, such as you gave for the DPW works. This suffers because of its juxtaposition to that presentation. I get the feeling that, as Mr. Wojcik mentioned, we're being led down a trail that really we don't know where the end is.
Ms. Angelides?
I would like to respond to the two gentlemen in regards to what we're looking for on, I'm on the liaison for the Council on Aging. I think what we are looking for is a more presentable plan, to be able to make presentations to the community. COA feels that they really need to have some more answers in regards to what is going on within the two sites, schematics, to be able to show exactly what they're looking for in regards to what would look like if it was in Turner Park, what would look like if it was currently in its current position. As you can see, the COA has been very judicious in its use of money and has been slowly trying to bring this project along. Now, I know you can say they're spinning their wheels, but I think that you are going to see some progress be made, and that's why we really are looking for that little extra money going forward so that we can move forward on the project. It was accepted as the Select Board as a town project, and so the Select Board will probably have more questions to ask right now to be able to get those answers. This money will allow it to keep the project moving forward. And you're saying if that $50,000 is the back of the envelope, I think you're probably going to get a little bit more. There are already 2 studies out there. This will be a study that will answer questions that the public's going to bring up, as well as a Select Board. And they will be looking for input from the various residents also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wojcik.
A related matter, are the reports on the first 2 studies available in the public domain, as for instance, a copy available in the library so I could read them?
Mr. Crane?
They should be on the website.
It should be on the website?
I'm sorry, Mr. Wojcik, I will ask that you ask all of your questions at once. There's no cross-examination.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Gold.
I'd like to just answer a couple of questions from the perspective of at least myself on the Select Board, and I'm speaking for myself, but some of the questions that were asked were pretty good. And I think Marie Angelides got a good start on what we're trying to do here. This project had been based on a citizen's petition. And more recently, following a couple of studies that were done, a total of $35,000 that was originally appropriated and then renewed. A couple of studies have done and looked at 2 sites. The summary of the report that we got was, if you renovate and expand where we are versus build new somewhere else, it's a differential of maybe, I'm not going to say double to build somewhere else, but it's pretty close. I'm not sure I agree with the numbers, but because they're all going to change, but it was like $5.6 million versus $9.4 million. And it was on that basis that me personally said, we probably have a site selected here, which is the current site. Now, that's just me looking at it when it was proposed. When it came before the Select Board, the question was, now what do we do? Do we want to keep this project moving forward, or do we want this project to stop? And really, the town only has 2 times a year to put money into a project, and this is one of them. You have $50,000 is somewhat the back of the envelope, but the idea is we need some money so that as things come up moving forward, we have some funds to spend. Now you say, well, what are we going to do moving forward? Primarily, the Council on Aging has identified that they would like to take on some fundraising for this project. You can't fundraise by saying to people, we've got an idea, and oh, by the way, we think it's going to be in this site. You got to get fancy pictures. You got to get some design project. You literally need to do that, and some of that costs money. What I was told, and why I bought into this article, was let's give them every opportunity they need to go fundraise for this thing by getting those drawings and getting a little bit more design. From my perspective, I think I know where I'd like to see it go. I think I know where the finances said we're going. We're not locked in there, but that's, I think, where we're going with the drawings. So the support I had was based on just giving us some money to move forward over the next year, because we don't have any opportunity to get more money between now and then. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, Madam Moderator, my name is Mary Beth Bergeron. I live at 497 Inverness Lane. I've been a town resident for 40 years. I currently sit on the Board of Directors for the Council on Aging, and just for the purpose of sort of transparency, I'll just take a moment and make a few comments. The Board of Directors has a task force that has been working diligently, or a number of task forces actually, that work diligently towards, with the cooperation of Mr. Crane, for identifying certain sites in town that might be suitable for a senior center, to bring our facilities up to today's and tomorrow's standards. We hired a company to do a preliminary study of that, and they also identified the same 3 sites as well as a renovation of the existing building. A couple of months ago, they made that recommendation, but understand that the costs that they came up with were very preliminary, and they did not identify all of the costs, for example, that would be involved with the renovation of the existing site. It was immediately identified at that particular Board of Directors meeting that that was a glaring deficiency in their cost analysis. They had not looked at certain things like hazardous material mitigation costs for asbestos that was in the building. That's just one example. There is, and again, for transparency's sake, the Senior Center Task Force identified a site at Turner Park as the preferred site that the seniors wanted. They felt that that would be the most appropriate. It would not take away ball field from the existing Turner Park, and it would allow for future use of that building for other management uses by the town. That's not set in stone. What we did realize at that meeting, at that presentation, is that additional information was needed. We cannot get that additional information without this being funded tonight. So that's what this money does. It's not a lot of money in comparison to what ultimately, as we have seen in the previous article, what the preliminary startup costs are for building for a town. So what we are looking for is just additional funds so that we can hire this firm to continue the studies and analyze the costs of a number of sites and come back to you at some date in the future for a presentation for the preferred site as it's selected. And that obviously is going to be managed by the town and not necessarily by the Senior Center. I'd also like to point out that what has been stated by Marie Angelidis is true. We do have, we are beginning to formulate a fundraising committee on behalf of this project. We are hoping that we will be able to secure funding for either supplemental funds for the construction of this building from town residents and other philanthropic individuals, and or fund the additional furniture, the equipment, et cetera, that will be needed within that facility. So that is definitely up, running, and we are getting that off the ground. Because we feel that there are people in town who would support us above and beyond what it would cost them on a yearly basis in their tax funds. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready to come to a vote? Oh, sorry. Mr. Russell.
Madam Moderator, Jim Russell, 108 Bel Air Drive, Long Meadow. I too am a member of the Council of Aging Board of Directors. These volunteers who get paid nothing and spend countless hours have put their heart and soul into this project to serve the seniors of Long Meadow. I compliment the Finance Committee, Mr. Law, the chairman, and his other members for their due diligence, and thank them for endorsing this project. I'm going to speak now as chairman of the Park and Recreation Department. We've already heard that there's a likelihood that land will be taken on Wolf Swamp Road fields from recreation. If the final recommendation for renovation of the senior center where it stands takes place, we're going to lose more land, more playing fields. There's a great concern on behalf of the Recreation Department as to the impact of that. You have an old building that's 60 years old, and no matter how much money is spent, you still have an old building when you get done with the renovations, and Parks and Rec gets crippled even further. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready to come to a vote? All in favor of the motion under Article 9, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. All opposed, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. The motion passes by majority affirmative vote. Article 10, Ms. Angelides.
To transfer from available funds in the Treasury $53,074 to the Operational Stabilization Fund.
Is there a second? You may speak to the issue.
In accordance with the Select Board policy, once the budget's balanced and all known deficits are accounted for, free cash in excess of $500,000 will be transferred to the Operational Stabilization Fund. This transfer to the Operational Stabilization Fund will set money aside for future needs of the community. The current balance in the Operational Stabilization Fund is $2.67 million.
This vote requires a 2/3 majority. Any discussion? Then we'll come right to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read, please raise your blue cards. All those opposed, please raise your blue cards. The motion passes by unanimous affirmative vote by declaration. Article 11. Mr. Grant.
Madam Moderator, I move that the town vote to amend the demolition delay bylaw definition of commission under Article 1, Section Definitions, as stated in the warrant.
Is there a second? You may speak to the issue.
The composition of the Long Meadow Building Demolition Committee, as currently structured, has permanent terms of appointment. The revised language would establish terms of office limits for the members of the committee, set minimum meeting criteria, and assign responsibility implementation of the demolition delay bylaw solely to the Long Meadow Building Demolition Committee. And I'll speak further to this. You may recall that this was a topic of somewhat hot discussion last year. I can tell you that the change, the composition is the same as it is now. What this would do is set term limits. I should tell you, by way of context, this committee has never met. I believe this bylaw has been in existence for over 10 years. So this is a non-functioning committee. And you simply cannot have permanent terms. If people leave, then you lack a quorum. And this is really just an administrative matter to allow this committee to actually function. And it actually requires it to meet once per year.
Any further discussion?
Dan O'Malley, 68 Fairhill. I've been actively involved with this bylaw for a number of years, and I just wanted to clarify. The board has met on 2 occasions, actually 3 occasions. There has really been no need to meet because there has never been a structure in town since 2006 that has needed a meeting. So that was just part of clarification. Having said that, I'm in favor of this motion. I was the one who was against it, but we worked through that, and I agree that this is the way it should be written, and I am in favor of it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Then we shall come directly to a vote. All those in favor of the motion under Article 11, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your blue cards. The motion passes by unanimous affirmative vote. We come to Article 12. Mr. Grant.
Madam Moderator, I move that the town vote to add the following language as a new section to the general bylaws as stated in the warrant.
Second.
The motion has been made in second, and the motion under discussion is the article as printed in your warrant. Any questions or discussion?
May I speak to it, Your Honor?
Oh, forgive me, yes.
This bylaw is meant to ensure that the needs of all users of Long Meadow streets are considered when streets, parking lots, and pathways are designed, constructed, and maintained. Traditionally, transportation projects have been formulated with motor vehicles in mind. This bylaw would further Long Meadow's commitment to making its streets safe for pedestrians, cyclists, and those taking public transit. The bylaw does not require that bike lanes or any other specific feature be included in every project or in any particular project. Rather, it requires that the needs of motorists, cyclists, and pedestrians and public transit users be considered together during the planning phases of these projects. And if I might just speak further to this article, I think the best way to think of this bylaw is that it sets a goal. And what's mandatory about it is that the needs of all users be considered. And it also measures progress toward that goal. And I think that's important because setting a goal doesn't mean much unless you reevaluate it and measure it. The other point that I would make, and I know probably a lot of people are thinking, my goodness, this is going to cost money. This bylaw is perfectly appropriate to consider cost. If a bike lane is too expensive, if a sidewalk, rumble strip is too expensive or not appropriate, that's fine. It just needs to be considered. I would note that this, I was the drafter of this bylaw, and I cribbed heavily from the Ogdensburg, New York Complete Streets bylaw. The reason why I did that was because it won the award by Smart Growth America for the #1 best complete streets policy or bylaw. So I think that speaks to the soundness of this idea and the structure of the bylaw.
Well, Mr. Starr, you wish to sit down. Mr. Roganus and then Mr. Metz.
My name is Dean Rognus, number 22 Warren Terrace. I would like to ask one or two questions. One, aren't we now doing everything that the bylaw calls for? Number two, what is the cost that is going to be imposed on town projects? And number three, why do we need an overlay of rules? This is a town of sidewalks. We've got bike lanes all over the place. And I always hear that this is not going to do anything, it won't add costs on and so forth, but it is going to. And when you add costs on, you put those costs in competition with the senior center, with the schools, with other areas of priority in the town budget. And fourth, I would like to ask the town manager, I assume when we do streets and sidewalks and so on, we do take into account the things that are called for under this bylaw. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Crane.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. The thing that the bylaw does that I think is good is it makes you think of these things as a part of your course of doing business. And we do sometimes do it, but there's always kind of a push-pull when you're doing roadway planning because of the limits of the right-of-way. We have generous tree belts. People like the tree belts. We do have sidewalks in many places, but they're also absent in many others. And the real hook for this, for me, is that when you do pursue federal transportation grant funding, having this bylaw in place gives you kind of a checkbox and enhances your chances. I mean, if you're asking me, do I realistically think this is going to drive up our costs of our transportation projects? I don't think in a significant way, but it is an opportunity to gain other resources that could be available to us. And so I do support the bylaw. I know that even in our traffic committee, which is the police department, the town engineer, DPW director, and myself, when we're trying to solve intractable vehicle problems, it's easy to get distracted from issues related to sidewalks and cyclists. One of the things we have a goal, I think at least the traffic committee has a goal, to make pedestrian safety and bicycle safety a priority so we can enhance walking and biking, especially around our schools. So I think that this bylaw really makes that it codifies that effort for the town.
Mr. Metz.
Stephen Metz, 171 Coventry Lane. Now speaking as chairman of the Capital Planning Committee. Mr. Grant very eloquently pointed out that we don't have a capital plan, long-range capital plan. We have a lot of long-term infrastructure costs that are going to be coming in, not to mention the special projects that are coming in. Before this sort of bylaw is brought into place, I think it ought to be put into context with all those other things and looked at as part of all that before it's brought to a 3-page warrant that entry that no one's had a chance to look at or even come up with potential unforeseen consequences, which I must assure you there are a lot of. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would.
Could you speak closer to the mic, please?
I'm sorry. Dean Rognus, number 22 Warren Terrace. I would just like to add, it seems to me that if you want to do this, this is something for a policy to be adopted by DPW, but it is not something that should rise to the level of a bylaw. And again, we can talk about cost. We are adding rules on top of everything else we do. I don't know why we aren't doing this right now in your planning, but I just don't think we need another rule, another overlay, more bylaws on top of bylaws to do something like this. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ernest Welker, 243 Burbank Road. I rise to speak against this. At the end of Mr. Grant's remarks, I can't recall his exact words, he said something to the effect that these are goals. And then subsequently he said, of course, you have to have some metric of measuring against the goals to know you're making progress. And in those words, I hear that somehow we're going to be judged on this when it is supposed to be open to simply effort and a good, honest effort. Who's going to make the judgment that it's good enough? I can see lawsuits coming out of something like this very easily from people who, for one reason or another, can't engage in some sort of activity that they think is important, and others here, and so I rise to speak against this.
Thank you. Ms. Angelides.
The Complete Streets program, I think I sort of agree with Mr. Rognus. Don't we do that now? Yes, I think that we do it now. I think Longmeadow is an incredible town. It's got, I think that one of its wonderful assets are its sidewalks. You can walk this town. You can't do that with the majority of towns in Western Mass. So this is an amazing town. And when I first heard about Complete Streets, it was Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. And I understand that Springfield's a Complete Streets town. Holyoke's trying to become one, Northampton, and you say, why does everyone want the designation of Complete Streets? Because just stating on Complete Streets that you are going to consider sidewalks as an important asset in your town, that you're going to consider bike traffic as an important asset in your town, and you want to promote it, means that you are now available for federal funding. Means that when your TIP projects go in there, there's a point system that goes down. And believe it or not, Complete Streets bylaw means you get, I think it's 4 or 5 points towards your streets that really pushes you up on all your other streets. So are we already a Complete Streets town? Yes. We just needed the designation by either doing a bylaw. If we didn't do a bylaw, it could have been a vote by the select board, but it was decided that, well, some towns are going for a bylaw, let's just put it in as a bylaw. Do we need to say we're going to do so many sidewalks a year? No. Are we going to be worried about not doing enough? I think this town is already budget after budget showing it's really important for us to take good care of our sidewalks. So the Complete Streets program is to make sure that we always consider this an important asset in town, that we do look at it when we consider general planning. And you know, when other people do developments in town, whether it's the shops or a private housing development, they have to consider sidewalks also, because that's how people in Longmeadow like to get around. I thought it was really interesting to hear a discussion by the shops and Mr. Walker. They did an analysis of traffic going through when they were doing their planning, and they said, wow, compared to other towns this size, we have a huge number of pedestrians that are coming to our shops. So are we a Complete Streets town? I say we always have been. By just making this designation, it means that other people will recognize us as really considering our streets and our sidewalks, and it will also open us up for funding in the future. Thank you.
Hi, Walter Gunn, 1579 Longmeadow Street. I'm not going to talk many more on this matter, but what you're hearing up front tonight is accurate and correct. I sit on the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We're the people who actually, for the region, dole out the money for transportation projects. I happen to know now that there's a thing called Green Dot. Green Dot is a program that was started by the previous governor and now carried on by the current administration in Boston. And it pretty much is just what Ms. Angelides said. They're putting more stress on our money that we get for grants and for public and transit money. So federal money comes down, matched with state money, then comes into the town, and it's getting more and more scored. The Complete Streets thing is real. It's been a growing, successful program throughout the United States, and now in Massachusetts, what you hear is true. It is going to become a measurement of what Long Meadow can get for funds in the future. Nobody's going to get sued for this, and as they've stated, there's no additional money. It's something to be considered. The fact that we put this in our bylaw, it becomes a tool in the toolkit. And the toolkit is the same thing we did a few years ago with the planning board. We did the photovoltaic solar array thing. These things all added to our score, and every year we get more grant money, and we got a better opportunity at competing for the real tight supply of money that comes out of Boston. So I'm in support of this bylaw. Thank you.
Summer.
Cynthia Summer, 57 Farmington Avenue. I am a Long Meadow driver, a Long Meadow cyclist, and a Long Meadow pedestrian. I think this is probably a good idea, but I would love somebody to explain to me, are we required to get these points that you keep talking about in this favorable consideration? Does it matter if it is a policy of, either the planning department or whoever, if you could tell me who does actually review street plans and stuff now? I'm not really sure. Or does it have to be a bylaw? Or what are the advantage? Do we have a choice? Or is one stronger or better than the other, policy versus bylaws?
Madam Moderator, may I speak
Mr.
Crane? Just double checking with Walter over there. The bylaw does give you additional credit. It's a stronger commitment to these green dot initiatives and enhances your. It kind of like this. I believe we have a tree policy, a tree bylaw, that was a requirement of our Tree City USA designation. I mean, this is when they come out with these programs and give people these enhancements to whether it's recycling or trees or transportation. The funders want to see a commitment from the community that they are taking this seriously through an adoption of a bylaw. That's why it's written as a bylaw. And the thing I'll say is, because we're already doing these things, because when we review plans, we take into consideration bicyclists and pedestrians and all modes of traffic, this is the easiest money out there. And, I think that it's a bit of an overthink to believe that it's going to radically alter our approach. It won't. Again, it codifies what we're already doing. It's a very competitive market. It's a very competitive arena out there for transportation funds. Long Meadow does not have a lot of vehicle miles compared to a lot of communities, so on formula things, we don't fare very well. We need things like this, and because we already do it, this is something that is an excellent codification of our process. One final point, and I won't belabor the point, Madam Moderator, but the select board, town management, Department of Public Works works with the select board on the execution of this bylaw, and the select board enjoys broad authority to grant exemptions. So we're not really locked into anything that is, it's not like getting a tattoo, you're not locked in anything that's gonna, you're gonna regret. The select board does enjoy the power to grant exemptions when it's costly and, other available means or factors indicate an absence of need, including future need. It's pretty vague. So when I reviewed this, I didn't look at this as something strenuous or something that we were going to have to really change how we operate to abide by. So again, I do think it's good for future funding purposes.
Mr. Elias.
Yeah, Richard Elias, 608 Frank Smith Road. I'd like to address the concerns of the young lady. First, what does a bylaw do? It says the intent of the town. This bylaw does not cost us anything. It just reemphasizes that the intent of this town is to be useful in all ways to all citizens and to make a town a good and happy place for people to live. This in no way affects that. If it gets us a couple of extra bucks from the state, that's marvelous, because we are always considered the deep pockets town in this state, and we don't get consideration for a lot of things. But this is one. They put it in statistical analysis, and if that gets us money so we can do our sidewalks that need repair, do crossings for the people, lights, crossing lights and stuff like that, and have the state pay for part of it, let's go with it. It doesn't commit us to do anything. It just says that we're always been doing this, and it's just saying that now we've put it as a commitment. Thank you.
Mr. Starr.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Larry Starr, 81 Williamsburg Drive. The concepts embodied in this language are wonderful, and we all support it, and we all believe we're already doing it. That's probably true. But this reminds me of how the Internal Revenue Code and regulations got to be 138,000 pages. Okay, you just keep adding things that sound good, and they keep adding them, and you keep adding them, and you keep adding them. What I heard Mrs. Angelides say, which I was waiting for, was that this could be done by the Select Board adopting a resolution that has the exact same language. And if that is correct, then why don't we just do it that way? Why don't we just have the Select Board adopt it, then it's not in our bylaws, it's not part of the bylaws, but we get to check the same box saying we're a green community, or whatever the word is that goes along with this. This is a feel-good amendment. It doesn't really do anything, which everybody has said. It doesn't do anything, but maybe gets us a few dollars. And if we can do that by having the Select Board adopt it as a provision, then let's do it that way. It's a much simpler process. So my question is, I heard you say that. Is that in fact true?
It's not clear compared to the various, some towns are doing it in a policy, some towns are doing it in a bylaw. The towns that are doing it in a bylaw, it's considered stronger. The Select Board decided they preferred it to be as a bylaw rather than just a policy, since it was something that they felt it should go in front of the town, it should go in front of town meeting, rather than the 5 deciding it. So that's why the Select Board has decided to bring it forward in the form of a bylaw.
Madam Moderator, can I just continue on that point?
Usually we try to get to new speakers first. I'll allow this one time, and
So
then we'll move on.
with that as a given, then what you're saying is we don't know. It doesn't appear to be any guarantee that it makes any difference, and other towns are doing it the other way. With that as a given, I would suggest that we not adopt it here, let the Select Board go and adopt it, and if in a year it turns out that we do need to make it a bylaw, bring it back to us and say, you know what, you really have to have a bylaw. But if it appears at this point we don't, let's not. Adopt it as a policy, and we're as good as every other town or most other towns in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Herb Zettel. I live on 52 Birch Road. I'm not a cyclist, but I'm amazed every day how many people cycle through Longmeadow. And I'm just thinking about the safety of these cyclists. Would it be nice to have a sign on our streets, share the road? My wife is from Vermont. We go to Vermont all the time. Every road in Vermont has a sign, share the road. As I drive through Route 100, or I go to North End, Springfield, there are all these new signs about cycling lanes. And I really think, number one, the safety of our streets should be our most important concern. And I think to make an awareness, and again, I'm not a cyclist, I wish I was, but I'm amazed how many people do use the bicycle and so forth. So just for the safety aspect, I'm all in favor of this to make our streets safer, and we heard all the other arguments, how that would improve our standing and so forth. And I think it wouldn't cost us much when we reline those new paved roads and simply have a bicycle, either a sign or a sign, share the road on the side, makes me as a driver more aware of, oh, I better watch, there might be some bicyclists on this road. So I'm all in favor. From that one reason alone, we should support that.
Thank you.
you.
Yes, sir.
Bill Harbison, 217 Farmington Road. I also would like to promote complete streets, and I really commend the Select Committee for researching it. It's very complicated. It's been adopted by over 700 communities in the United States very successfully. My son, who was the town planner in Portland, has had a lot of experience with it in many towns in Maine. Very successful. I disagree. I do not think that Longmeadow is a complete streets town. We do not have adequate cycling lanes, for instance. And I would just point out that I see a lot of cyclists biking the wrong way on streets. I see a lot of cyclists biking on sidewalks, which we really shouldn't be doing. And part of the reason is we don't have, as Mr. Joyella said, share the road signs, which I have recommended to the Select Board before. And we have no bike lanes in this town. And there's a few places in particular where there could be bike lanes. And I commend the DPW for the tremendous work they did over the summer with the potholes and repaving Laurel Street and recently Frank Smith. But Laurel Street is perfectly set up now for bike lanes. The only thing that it's missing is stencils that says bike lanes and maybe share the road signs in the north and south end of the towns. And that's something that is not going to cost more than a couple $100 to put stencils in, so long as the town votes in favor of that. I think it has been shown statistically that when you put bike lanes on a road like Laurel, it will slow down the traffic because there's less room for the cars to pass each other. My corner, Farmington Road and Longmeadow and Laurel Street has some of the most accidents in the whole town of Longmeadow. We've had several accidents this year. Just a couple weeks ago, one of my wife's violin students was involved in an accident turning into Farmington Road because people speed down Laurel. And we're not going to put speed bumps in Laurel, but if you turn those bike lanes, which the DPW basically has the bike lanes, if you turn them into actual bike lanes, I can guarantee you that the traffic will slow down. And I think that this is not committing us to anything, but I think it's something that we should definitely be considering. I would vote very much in favor of the complete streets, and I commend the Select Board for recommending it.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Seth Tenenbaum, 28 Ardsley Road. I support what the guy who said earlier about the IRS. There's no reason if the town will approve this anywhere why I believe we should do this. Same with Mr. Starr. I think I'll speak everything he said. I will repeat. And for that reason, I don't think it's beneficial to vote this down, but I also don't think it's necessary. So I'm going to motion to lay it on the table.
Hold on one moment, please. A motion to lay on the table is not debatable, and you have spoken in favor at the start, so that motion is out of order. Ms. Rogenus.
Mary Rognus, 22 Warren Terrace. I understand that the intent is laudable. And I also commend the town for the tremendous work they've been doing as the beneficiary of sidewalk that was just replaced this year. The corners are graded with the bumps, whatever they're called, for assistance at the intersections. One intersection was shut off because it was deemed bike safer and pedestrian safer not to have that as a crossing. I also am concerned, seriously concerned, at the number of times that I see the word shall in this proposed bylaw. Because shall does not mean anything is optional. Shall means this shall be done. An option would be may. May is used a few times, very few times, but only when it's saying how you can have an exception to all of the shalls, so that you may have an exception to the shall, but you shall do everything. And I just find that as a serious enough concern that I would prefer to have this as a policy by this by the select board rather than a bylaw for the town. Thank you.
Ms. Angelides.
I would like to speak to why we can't just leave this to the hands of the select board. I believe tonight, if it is voted down as a bylaw, there will be no will among this board to pick it up again, because the voice of the community is that we do not want to be a complete streets and to consider this within our projects. So I think it will lay off the agenda and we won't see it come back on. My concern is why we're coming up now to a fall town meeting. You can bring it back in the Springtown meeting. In the meantime, it will go out there that Longmeadow does not want to be a complete streets town. So I think that the intent of what the community is interested in will come out of this, and the decision will be made. To say we want it in another form instead of the bylaw, it sounds nice, it's a process or procedure. I just don't see that as that will be a result of what this town does decide, if they decide not to go forward on it. Thank you.
Mr. Starr.
Thank you. Larry Starr, 81 Williamsburg Drive. I just have to say, that's a completely unfair statement based on what's been talked about at this meeting. There isn't anybody who said, I didn't hear anybody who said we don't want to be a complete streets. What we said is, go back, take it back. Those of us who said something else should happen, go back, adopt it at that level. For anybody at the select board to say that that means the town is not in favor of it is an absolute abdication of what's being said here and what people are telling you. And that's simply being used for political purposes to enhance the process of getting it passed tonight, which may very well happen, but that is so unfair.
Mr. Starr.
Yes.
We do not question motives of the speakers in town meeting.
I'm not questioning the motive. I'm just
Excuse
telling
me,
you that
sir.
that's a fact.
Excuse me, sir. You were stating that this was done for political purposes. Yes, sir.
Stephen Metz, 171 Coventry Lane. In slightly more gentle terms, I must echo what Mr. Starr said. I'm afraid Ms. Angelides totally mischaracterized the mood of this town meeting. Everybody in this town wants to have safe streets. We want to have meet these criteria. However, this is a big sledgehammer on a very small nail. And I think that it makes a lot of sense to me to ask the select board to pursue this as a policy because of the unintended consequences that may well come from this, not to mention the very real costs. It's going to cost more than a couple $100 to put a bike lane in, and a lot of the things I read in this article suggest that there are changes that have to be made to, for example, in private driveways and so forth, that are going to come up to very unreasonable cost for the community. So I echo Mr. Starr's comments, not in those terms, but I do urge that we ask the select board to bring this up as a policy rather than a bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, Mary Beth Bergeron, 497 Inverness Lane. I, for one, truly appreciate the fact that the select board brings it to me, a town voter, at this meeting. I appreciate the fact that they did not make this decision unilaterally at their level, that they're asking me, a town voter, to say aye or nay about this particular issue. I am, in fact, in favor of it, as I think many people are here. We do have a wonderful community with a lot of biking, a lot of runners. We want them all safe, and I, for one, will definitely vote in favor of the motion on the floor, and I thank the Select Board for letting me make the decision and not you unilaterally making the decision for us.
Mr. Brandt?
I guess I would just like to address this concern about shalls. And I would encourage you to look at the verbs after the word shalls. There are no shalls, and we drafted it purposely. It says anything about shall having to spend any money. It's really a matter of considering. I mean, for example, one of the shalls is the town shall foster partnerships with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and neighboring communities to develop facilities and accommodations that benefit us. How could anybody be against that? That's a good shall. The way I see it, this is really just a nudge toward a goal. And I think this measurement is important. So I wouldn't be concerned about the shalls.
Roger Wojcik, 57 Parkside. I believe that the bylaw codifies the policy of the Select Board, which ensures that its content will last far into the future past the current Select Board members. I fully support it.
Yes, the name is Dean Rognus, number 22 Warren Terrace. I, too, am a lawyer, and I am always concerned about the word shall. So lawyers can argue back and forth. What the word shall means, you shall do it. And even if you're not a lawyer, if it's mom or dad talking to their kids, they say shall, you shall do this, you do it. So I think it's an important word.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have had more than an ample amount of voters speak in favor and opposed. So I'm just alerting you that a motion to call the question is now in order if you are ready to make it. Yes.
This is Stephanie Jasmine, 123 Englewood Road. I just like to say and remind people that we're a walking town. Our kids walk to school, are expected to walk to and from school. I was here before at town meeting to get a simple cross light fixed at the corner of Englewood and Route 5, and we had to take it to town meeting to get a cross light fixed. Now, I have also been trying to get the cross light at the corner of Forest Glen and Route 5 fixed as well. I actually have seen a person hit there in the morning. This is something that we need, and you talk about new initiatives like bike lanes. We need this on there to get things fixed that are out there right now, to make the simple things as the cross lights working. So I support this.
Yes, sir.
Stephen Wise, 18 Pioneer Drive. I move that we call the question.
We shall come to a vote on calling the question to end debate. This is not a vote on the motion itself. This is a vote on whether to end debate. All those in favor of ending debate, raise your cards. This is a 2/3 vote. All those opposed, please raise your cards. The motion passes by declaration to end debate. We shall come directly to a vote on the motion under Article 12. All those in favor of the motion as printed in the warrant, please raise your blue cards. All those opposed, please raise your blue cards. The motion passes by majority affirmative vote. I ask that you wait one moment. Before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I have a very special announcement. Since 1979, town meeting has entrusted legal matters to the same town council. David Martell has served our town as a whole and town meeting in particular. Prior to embarking on a legal career, David was a newspaper reporter in Springfield and Washington, D.C., where he covered Congress, the White House, and the Supreme Court. He is a former member of the Statewide Commission on Judicial Conduct and is a former president of the Hampden County Bar Association. He's also a trustee of the Springfield Cemetery, is a director and former president of the Springfield Public Forum, and a member of the executive committee of the Affiliated Chambers of Commerce of Greater Springfield. Not for ourselves alone are we born, said Cicero, the Roman philosopher and lawyer himself. Mr. Martell may have been our town's council, but clearly he has also proven himself a citizen in the highest form. In his 36 years of service, he has helped his neighbors and fellow citizens to conduct the town's business in a prudent way. This shall be his last town meeting serving in this capacity. This December he is to retire, and come springtime, he shall sit among you all. Would you please welcome him to that new role and thank him for his 36 years of service?
I guess this would be a good time for me to confess how little I knew about municipal law in 1979. There are those who say, I don't know that much about it now, but it was a lot less back then, and it's been a pleasure to serve the town that I chose to live in, the town that I love, and it's been a very nice run. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
I shall entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor of adjourning this 2015 town meeting, raise your blue cards. All opposed, the 2015 town meeting is now adjourned. Dissolved.